All right, we might have a couple more people jump on, but might get started. All right, so firstly, I just want to say a big thank you for being here tonight. I know with restrictions starting to ease and sport starting to resume, people are quite busy and it is hard to get along to these things, but I think it's such a great time to deliver this workshop because I know clubs have been significantly impacted by COVID financially. So hopefully this can help you out and give you some ideas to take back to your clubs. So tonight's focus is on financial planning and management. And I would just like to begin with an acknowledgement of country. So we acknowledge the Wurundjeri Wurrung people as the traditional owners of the country in which Nillumbik is located. We pay our respects to elders past, present and future and extend that respect to all First Nations people. We respect the enduring strength of the Wurundjeri Wurrung and acknowledge the sovereignty was never ceded. All right. So we have a bit to get through tonight and I'm pleased to introduce our speakers to you all. We have Michael Stoll. I'm not sure if he's jumped on yet, but he's from Richmond Football Club and he'll be discussing the financial growth of Richmond Football Club, how clubs can raise revenue and how to successfully fundraise. We have Liam O'Brien from Aligned Leisure to talk about the importance of procurement and utilising sponsors. And we'll also be having Ian Culbard, he's Nillumbik's Sustainability Officer, or one of the Sustainability Officers. He'll be jumping on later and he's going to be sharing his tips and tricks with you on energy saving and sustainable practices. So is Michael jumped in yet? Or we might have to go to you, Liam.
He just needed to find the meeting link. He's just waiting for it to come through now, Brooke. So he's about to jump in about 2 seconds.
Yeah, perfect. Just as well, if you have any questions throughout the meeting, feel free to drop them in the chat. But we will have some question time at the end to ask presenters. So you can hold off until then or drop them in the chat along the way. While we're waiting for Michael as well, if you wanted to just drop in the chat what club you're from, just so we can get an idea of who's here, that would also be fantastic. Thank you. I think we've got some Banyule and Manningham clubs as well along tonight, which is nice. All right. Liam, did you just want to let me know when Michael's jumped?
Yep, he's just literally clicking through now. We don't use Zoom a lot for our business stuff. We use Microsoft Teams. So I think he's just got to configure some, I think he's jumping in right now.
Oh, yeah, perfect. Thank you. Thanks for joining us, Michael.
My pleasure. Apologies for that.
No, that's okay. I've just done a bit of an introduction on you, but
fantastic.
I'll let you take it away when you're ready.
All right, brilliant. Thank you. Yeah, so, and firstly, apologies for my appearance. Like many of us, looking forward to lockdown finishing up and getting into the hairdresser. Caught out by this 1 week lockdown and yeah, looking a bit of a mess at the moment. So my apologies. But look, I'll fire away. I've stuck pretty close to the notes that I was provided as to what to cover. So hopefully you get something out of it. But I don't have a lot of time, I've put my contact details there, and they're at the end of the presentation as well. And don't hesitate to give me a call or shoot me an email if there is anything that you want to follow up on after the presentation tonight. So as you can see there, Chief Operating Officer, Company Secretary of the Richmond Football Club, joined the club back in 2001. So I've been with the club for just over 20 years. Responsibilities with that Chief Operating Officer role is the finance function of the club, overseeing facilities, which we're about to embark on another $65 million redevelopment of our training and admin base. Total player payments, soft cap assistance to the footy department, our hospitality operations, and governance. And just in terms of governance, if I can get you to go to the next slide, Brooke. We've got a comprehensive board and committee structure, and it's significant that we do. Obviously, accountability of the club is really, and governance of the club is really significant. As we all know, we're not the largest organisations going around, but given we are high profile, being in the sporting industry, publicity comes to us if things go awry. So we're, as a club, very significant in terms of committee structures. And as you can see there, we've got a number of committees, the redevelopment committee, finance and audit, investments, gaming, hospitality, governance and remuneration, history and tradition, nominations, risk, compliance, integrity. And that's a big part of my role. I sit on all of those committees except history and tradition and nominations committee. And it's a real sort of KPI of mine to, navigate those committees and the committee members through the meetings and the material around those meetings, and really to keep our CEO, Brennan Gale, out of them. He comes in and pinch hits when he needs to, but really need him focused on our core operations being football and the many other significant undertakings a CEO of a footy club needs to take on. So it's a significant part of my role. Importantly, with those committees, and obviously encourage other organisations to do the same. We've got obviously existing board members that sit on those committees, but we've got external members as well, specialists in those fields that join those committees. And we've got charters for each, accountability, annual assessments, to try and keep them, fresh. And those external members are really significant to me, because obviously I get access to our board members, but to get additional specialists in each of those areas that I can tap into is significant, because the board members obviously already have board duties, board meetings, that sort of thing, whereas these specialists that sit on those committees that have only got the one committee involvement have got more time to give and are a huge asset to me. And just in addition to that, I also sit on the board of the Basher Hawley Foundation, and also the company secretary of Align Leisure, which I'll touch on during the presentation. It's a fully owned subsidiary that operates in the facility management space. And then outside Richmond, I'm involved on a local college council. I'm a director of a small hospitality company, and also involved with the Park Orchard Sharks through my daughter's participation down there. So obviously, the Richmond Football Club takes up a lot of my time, but there are a few smaller organisations that I'm involved with as well. If I can go to the next slide, and I'll keep an eye on the time, because I know I'm being followed by a colleague of Lloyd Clayman, who's an absolute star, and I certainly don't want to eat. I'm sure he will be able to provide a number of insights, and I don't want to eat into his time. So was asked to cover the financial growth of the Richmond Football Club and the sports industry, I guess, generally. And obviously the growth in the sports industry has helped us as a club significantly grow our revenue. So in the time that I've been there, our employee numbers have grown from 80 to over 1,000, largely on the growth of both at our Punt Road Oval operations, but also and across a whole range of departments, but significantly through a couple of there's a fully owned subsidiary, Align Leisure, which I'll touch on, and then also an education arm that we've added to our business. Annual revenue's grown from 21 million to 92 million. That was recorded just prior to COVID, so back in 2019, and obviously we've come off a bit, as most organisations have, as a result of the shutdowns and the disruptions to our operations. Members have increased from 25,000 to 105. Surpluses recorded in 9 of the past 10 financial years, and significantly that's translated into cash and investments as well. Obviously, cash is king. We've gone from a sort of the really dark times of $5 million in debt and owing about $2 million to our players at the end of each season and paying them out of future revenues, to a point now where we're fortunate enough to have cash and investments of about 24 million. And we've also significantly transformed our Punt Road Oval operations, and not only the Swinburne Centre, which is obviously the visible aspect of our operations, but also the Oval. We were sharing the Oval with the Richmond Cricket Club. It had been sort of narrowed and butchered over the years by extensions to Punt Road, etc. So we've been able to benefit greatly from a much improved Oval. We've gone from 1 team to 5 teams, although COVID's scaled that back to 4. So we previously just had an AFL team. Now we've got an AFL team, an AFLW team, our own VFL team, and a team that competes in the wheelchair competition as well. We did have a VFLW team, but unfortunately that has been put on hold for the time being during these COVID times, and with the soft cap being introduced by the AFL. And I think, you know, what's significant there is that and the the significant community focus that we have undertaken. So we've got 2 organisations, Clem Swim and the VRI Fencing Club, that are now tenants of ours at Punt Road Oval as a result of those facility improvements. We've also got a significant KGI operation in the Indigenous space. We've got the Melbourne Indigenous Transition School located on our premises. That's 25 Year 7 students from the Northern Territory that complete their Year 7 year at Punt Road Oval before they head out to various secondary schools around Melbourne. And we've also got the Bashahuli Foundation that is now operated out of Punt Road Oval. So where that's significant is it's given us additional properties to sell, specifically in relation to the teams. It's enabled us, rather than just having the one jumper now that we sell properties on, we've obviously got 2 jumpers, and the community focus. Obviously, the facilities allows us to drive more revenues associated with Punt Road Oval, but the community focus just opens up opportunities with a whole range of organisations that are looking for a social responsibility type message. So now we're not only we'd only attract organisations that are looking for brand opportunities on whether it be our jumper, shorts, signage at Punt Road Oval. We're looking now at partners that are keen to tap into those community programs and put their logo associated with those. The next slide is just the key drivers of our financial growth, sort of being more specific as to where that revenue that significant revenue increase has come from. And it's have to acknowledge that the industry growth, as I said at the outset, has contributed to that. Just the incredible interest and the continued increase in TV rights revenue and other digital revenue streams that the AFL sell on behalf of the club and on behalf of the industry. And as a result of that, we have received far more significant AFL distributions in recent times than what we did, say, 15, 20 years ago. Making members central to everything we do is a key reason why we've been able to increase our members from 25,000 to 105,000. A lot of people sort of assume that's driven by on-field success. However, we were into the high 70s in terms of membership numbers before we had the first premiership back in 2017. And it was a real focus on just making the members central, as I said, to everything that we do, communication, and using digital means to interact with them and give them unique experiences and insights into the club. And I guess the real significance of that was to ensure that the members don't receive their renewal notice in the mail and then don't hear from the club again until the next renewal notice comes around 12 months later. We want to sort of have that communication with them 12 months of the year, pre-season, during the season, using a whole range of measures. And obviously that's only been dialed up now in the COVID circumstances where our members and supporters are even more isolated from the club. Constant recognition of key stakeholders, not only members, but obviously partners, donors, the government, just ensuring that the contributions that they make are just constantly referred to, and just creating sort of attributing our success to each of those along the way. And I also should include there the AFL and venues as key stakeholders. And I guess with us being a sort of a big club with big supporter bases, it's been really a strength of ours to partner with the AFL and the Melbourne Cricket Club as much as we can, because in recognition of the fact that if we're successful, they're also successful. So we've certainly made no bones about that, and we've sort of had a number of discussions and projects with them to really sort of try and drive our business and their business at the same time. Fundraising and grants, as I said, are really significant and on a number of fronts. And I guess it's just finding common goals with external organisations that then we can sort of benefit from. So, for example, our last redevelopment of Punt Road Oval 10 years ago, we needed a pool, we needed a sports hall. The state government and the local council, Melbourne City Council, also needed a pool for some local residents and also needed a sports hall for the fencing club that we're now partnered with. So as a result of partnering with the state government, they provided grants. And now we've got the pool that operates in the morning for the public. We use it during the day, 3:30. All these local residents come in for learn to swim classes. And likewise with our sports hall, we use the facility during the day. At 4 o'clock, the doors come down between the gym and the sports hall, and the fencing club are in there until about 9 o'clock each evening. So I think, it's really significant. And I'll touch on the Australian Sports Foundation later, because they're a significant organisation that assists sporting clubs in a whole range of means. And we've worked with them for the full 20 years that I've been at the club. And it's in their interests to assist clubs raise funds, and they've been incredibly proactive in assisting us down that process. Another thing that has really enabled us to continue to grow our revenue is just reinvestment in our operation. I guess we've tried to take a long-term approach and just where we've had some wins in our revenue, reinvested some of that back in the business, not sort of just taken it straight to the bank, but just grown our operation. What we've been able to do, therefore, is bring additional skills to the table through additional personnel, but just certainly avoid burnout and exits where people are just spent. We've just tried to, and also by bringing in additional people, it creates management opportunities for some of our personnel, so they're constantly feeling as though they're being invested in and being provided with opportunities. So, and as a result of that, we've continued to see that revenue growth. Diversification of operations, as I mentioned, it's something that a lot of clubs are looking at, where we operate in a highly regulated competition where the AFL, attached to those media rights, want every game to be as close as possible, and therefore they're just constantly looking at ways to equalise the competition. We've had the salary cap and we've had the draft for years. Now we've got the soft cap in place as well. They're just hell bent on creating a really even competition. Therefore, we can't rely on just outsmarting our opposition and being successful on the field the whole time, because the whole system is designed to bring us down. So as a result of that, we've invested in a fully owned subsidiary called Align Leisure. Some of you will be familiar with that. We've partnered up with a number of councils like Nillumbik, where we now manage their facilities and provide numerous benefits back to the community. And we've got 28 leisure facilities now under management across Victoria and into New South Wales. And we've also partnered with Swinburne, where we're under Swinburne University's watch. We deliver sports leadership courses to about 250 students, again, in Melbourne, but also where we've got some aligned leisure operations in Mildura and Albury. And that's been really successful. It links them into the football club. It links them into employment through Aligned Leisure. We've seen some really successful outcomes, and it has diversified our revenue significantly and de-risked our operation. And then I also touched on the significant community focus that we've undertaken and the benefits that that's provided in terms of finding new partners. Conscious of time, so the next slide, the question was asked: how can clubs generate revenue? And some of the common areas of revenue growth were thrown up, and I guess for what it's worth, with our experience at Richmond, increasing participation is great if you can get it, but it's not easy, because obviously there's just numerous entertainment options available. We're just competing more and more with other sports, but as I said, with other entertainment options. And then also COVID has had a significant impact, and it's a bit of a worrying impact. And we're just now, I guess, holding our breath to see what happens in the future years, because it's forced a change of habits. People have sort of upgraded their lounge rooms, got the big screen in. They've become used to watching football on TV. And is that a permanent shift, or is that just a temporary shift? Because the frightening thing was when we did have some capacity for our home matches this year, we never got, well, most games we didn't get close to that capacity. So it's something that we'll obviously always strive for, but it is a concern and something that the whole industry is watching very closely. Sponsorship has been terrific, high margin, because of that I guess the nature of it, and particularly where those organisations increasingly want to link themselves to our community activities, where they're not looking for the traditional tickets to games, tickets to functions, entertainment. They're actually looking as much for the link to those community initiatives that we're undertaking. Grants, as I've touched on, are a really lucrative stream of revenue, I think, for organisations such as ours, because there are plenty of common outcomes in relation to both facilities and programs. I've touched on our facilities at Punt Road Oval, but also programs. There's obviously, we've invested in an AFLW team. And that's something that the Victorian state government are fully supportive of, are really trying to drive, really good outcomes for female sport. And therefore, our approach to them around our next upgrade of Punt Road Oval has been very well received, because a significant component of that will be to provide elite facilities for our women's program, which we currently don't have. And then the next three, sort of, I can almost group together: the merchandise, events and functions, and food sales. And again, I'm just following the notes and the questions that I got about this presentation. Our experience is that these three revenue streams, compared to match receipts, membership, sponsorship, are just really low margin operations. And as a lot of you will have experienced, there's a high cost of goods associated with each of these. They're generally labour intensive. In terms of merchandise, you've got stock risk. Obviously, you can be caught, change of sponsor, and all of a sudden you can be caught with a whole array of material that people just won't want, because they'll want to have the latest and greatest. And the competition as well. I mean, we went out to our after each premiership, we went out to our members about 30 seconds after the final siren with premiership offerings, and people sort of say, wow, you're cashing in, but you have to, because if you don't, other organisations will just jump in front of you and see some of that. I mean, I've just heard on the news today, some operators cashing in on the Melbourne Premiership, and it's a very competitive landscape. And when you look at the AFL and what clubs generate out of merchandise, it's a real surprise in that you often see two clubs do very well out of merchandise each year, and that's the club that won the premiership the prior year and has got that honeymoon period, and then the club that wins it and gets that spike at the end of the year. Aside from that, it's a pretty low margin affair across each of those areas. Just very quickly, key responsibilities of treasurers. I was asked to provide comment on that. Obviously, record keeping paramount. Reporting is significant, but also forecasting is something that's really important, because a lot of organisations such as ours receive a lot of revenue up front, be it from sponsors, from members, and that sort of thing. And therefore, things can look pretty good when you look at that reporting, but the forecasting as to what's going to happen between now and the end of the year, with plenty of expenditure throughout the season, it makes forecasting certainly as important, if not more important, than the current status through reporting. And also support. I couldn't encourage you more to share the task, and also getting other people involved through committee structures like we have means that the task can be shared, but also it provides greater governance, shared responsibility, shared accountability, rather than leaving up to the one person and the risk associated with that key person exposure. And then also seek assistance from resources available. There's a link there to a website where there's numerous examples of assistance that can be provided, and also organisations such as the Australian Sports Foundation, which, as I said, would only be too happy to help assist organisations raise funds. And then the final slide is just around fundraising. I was specifically asked to make a comment on fundraising. As I've touched on already, this is really significant. We've been able to tap into high net worth individuals that support the club, taken them on the journey. We've got obviously corporations that are, as I've said many times, attached to our community focus, and then government lining up our needs with their needs, and being able to partner up successfully. The significance of storytelling couldn't be emphasised more so. Just going back to those organisations, telling them how we've used the funds, and then obviously demonstrating the social impact that's created. We're lucky enough with Swinburne to be able to get some independent assessments undertaken by them of the impact of our social programs, which is really important. I mean, obviously we can tell the story ourselves, but nothing better than getting a third party to endorse what you're doing. And then one of our most successful campaigns was run through the Sports Foundation, their Fighting Tiger Fund campaign. where we raised $6 million at the time of our last redevelopment. But at that time, we had debt, we had the facilities need, and we also needed to reinvest in our football department. So the fact that we had 3 streams of fundraising going at the one time was really compelling, in that some people want to invest their money into bricks and mortar. Other people are happy for us to use it directly to enhance our football operation with the hope of on-field success. And then others are more, understanding of the burden of debt and the willingness to help us eradicate that. So in conclusion, I hope some aspects of this presentation are relevant to your organisation. But as I said there, as I said earlier, the time was limited, so I've had to race through that. But I can talk sport and leisure forever and a day. So I just encourage you, if there is something that you want to discuss further, delve further into, more than happy to take a call or shoot me an email, then I'll get back to you, because as I said, happy to assist wherever I possibly can.
Thanks very much, Michael. I'll also share your contact details with everyone as well at the end of the meeting. So if anyone wants to get in touch, they'll have your details.
All right. Fantastic. Thanks, Brooke.
No problem. Thanks for presenting. I'll now hand it over to Liam O'Brien from Align Leisure, and he's just going to have a chat about reducing expenditure.
Thanks, Brooke. Thanks, Starley. Always good to hear from the inside, and being a key part of Align for the last 4 years, and joined the organisation in our first or second year. It's been a good journey to go on. Starley set the benchmark high and has promised Lloyd Clayman, our head of procurement, but I've had to step in at the last minute. So hopefully I can support and do Lloyd's work justice as well. So just to probably join the dots together, Lloyd Clayman is our head of procurement, whose sole role is to look for opportunities to not only reduce expenditure and seek out different commercial opportunities that have benefit to the bottom line, but also to help us realise our community vision. That also extends through to our subsidiary businesses, which Align Leisure is part of the Richmond Football Club group. Part of Richmond Institute is another one of those as well. So Lloyd works really closely alongside with us. And I think when Ian presents a little bit later, there's some local benefits that Lloyd's been able to support, particularly with the operations of the 5 Nillumbik leisure facilities, which locally to Nillumbik are the biggest energy consumers across the community. So we've had some benefit back in there as well. So what I wanted to touch on today was probably, Michael's spoken at a really high level, and when you hear of revenues such as those that are coming out of the club, 103,000 members, and Brendan Gale's vision many years ago of 3 premierships and 75,000 members, and nearly got laughed out of the room. It's actually still a compelling story, because I think what it goes back to, and I'll pick up Michael's point around forecasting, is it's also understanding and being connected with local sporting clubs myself. It's where we're situated now, and where do we need to go? Like, what do we actually want to do? Are we just rolling on year after year and, sticking our finger up and trying to work out which way the breeze is, or are we sort of starting to think about what those 5-year opportunities are? But then when we bring it back to operations, I think there's some really good learnings, particularly from working closely with Lloyd, but also through the work that we do, working closely with community clubs and associations. Just some simple tips and techniques. So how do we take what Michael's spoken about and sort of bring them back to the real world with voluntary committees and sporting clubs that might have 10 members, 500 members, 2 teams, 1 team, non-competitive, etc. The rules are the same. It's just, keep your eye on your revenue, but also look at opportunities in the short term, just to be a little bit more consistent around that reducing income. So I think, Brooke, we might roll over and just some things that we can have a look about. And one of them is utilities. And I've been fortunate enough to see what Ian's presenting on a little bit later. So I'm not going to touch too much on that, because I think I'll leave that to the expert later on. But one of the key summaries, and I'll probably just throw a number out there, is through competitive procurement of energy suppliers, we've been able to save $75,000 alone just in our gas expenditure out of the Eltham Leisure Centre. When you've got massive pools and you need to heat massive bodies of water, same usage, decreasing expenditure by $75,000. So $225,000 down to a forecast expenditure of $150K in utilities, purely by asking for a better deal. It's as simple as that. So I'll leave that to Ian and go through some opportunities there. And more importantly, we've been able to forge a good partnership there as well. One of the other ones, which is just some little simple things to come through, is often we just roll over our insurances. You know, I respect the fact that we've got plenty of different arrangements with local councils who look after our assets, and there might be a tenancy agreement, there might be peppercorn leases, you might own your own asset as well, but don't just get your insurance and your asset and liability insurance every year and just roll it over and pay it. Just always go back to market. These are the simple things. Always review what you've currently got. Having looked through Ian's presentations, there's fridges and there's different things like that. Have we disposed of 2 fridges last year? We've gone from 3 down to 1, but on our insurance premium, we're still listed that we've got 3 fridges. Like, always have a look at making sure that your assets register is actually in line with what your insurance premiums are, because there's some simple things there that, when we're talking about a $1,000 insurance policy reduced down to $800, like that $200 for a local sporting club could actually be a significant impact as well. Starley spoke about it, and there's also the key thing around uniforms and merchandising as well. And one of the local stores we've got, we use TLA, who are effectively the wholesaler for Puma. They reached out to us to say that our current uniforms that we use within our venues is reaching end of life, and they're no longer going to carry that line. My comment back was, how much stock have you got left, and how much are you willing to sell that to us for? It costs us about $35 a piece for our polo shirts that our staff that work in the Nillumbik leisure facilities and across our other 5 local government areas wear. I was able to reduce that down to as low as $15 a piece, purely because I said, we'll take what indent you've got. So forecasting, we know that we on average have about a 5% year-on-year staff turnover, but we also know that every year staff, their uniform becomes tatty and everything like that as well. So one of the things there is also asking for that better deal, or again, have they got some end-of-line options that they need to move on that could benefit you, because you know what your lines are from there. Same as food and bev, like, we've gone through a massive change. Coca-Cola is the main sponsor of food and beverage of the AFL. We don't have to fall in line. So we've actually moved to Schweppes Asahi purely because we got a better deal. The deal wasn't so much, Coolridge water was cheaper than Mount Franklin. It was actually what we got in around that, which was greater supply of fridges, greater turnover of utility, often greater donation of goods as well. So, when you're ordering, your bottles of Schweppes or your bottles of water at the start, always ask them to say, hey, have you got any products that are reaching end of life that you need to move quickly? Because you might have your big player signing registration day, or you might have a big open day coming up that you might be able to grab 10 slabs of water for 50% off that you're selling it at $2.50 and you're getting for 50 cents. You've got a greater return. So yes, Michael mentioned that there's not a lot of room in that, but you've got to just ask the question, is effectively the lesson coming out of that, these particularly fast moving consumer goods, they've got a lot of stock that they need to move. You might be able to capitalize on that as well. One of the hot topics at the moment is cleaning supplies. You're going to have hand sanitizer up to your eyeballs. You're going to have wipes. Like, it's the new normal now. It's a very competitive market, and there are plenty of good opportunities to haggle out there, and it always asks for a better price as well. Might move through, Brooke, to the next one if we can. I'm going to contradict Michael. Cash is king. Cash is no longer king, particularly when you're asking for a handout. We often get approached, particularly running local government facilities, for, jump on board and, we'll give you a sign on the ground, and, we just ask for $5,000 cash. The reality is that we can't do that. And there's a lot of businesses out there that are really struggling for cash flow at the moment. So what can we do? And one of the biggest things and biggest shifts that we've been able to do, particularly working with a lot of sporting clubs, primary schools, local community organisations, is actually the benefit of contra. So one of the examples, we were approached by a local sporting club in Nillumbik, and they wanted a tier 1 pricing sponsorship proposal, $5,000. I said, I simply can't do that. But what I can do is I can give you 500 visits to our venue across the year, which has a perceived value of $10,000. And what that did was it provided greater opportunities where, everyone's got a player of the round or a volunteer of the round or something like that. How powerful is that story that you might be able to give them 10 visits to their local to their local leisure facility to go down and swim some laps or jump in the spa or pass it on to a friend or family member. But rather than putting all your eggs in one basket, if you've got all of those little add-ons or little gifts or donations or gifts that you can give back to your club, it actually helps. And one of the conversations and bit of feedback we got was it actually helped with player retention, where we're actually able to give some players that, they were trying to, get across from the dark side and the local competitor, and by giving them maybe a free membership or access to a local facility or a bit of contra, actually got the deal across the line, but it didn't cost the club anything to their bottom line. So it's also just going back to that old school philosophy of bartering or just asking the question. Again, I touched on a little bit earlier that we've all got different arrangements with our partnerships with sporting facilities as well. If you're responsible for, you know, maintenance and upkeep, ask your local Sparky, don't give us $2,000 of cash. Can you give us $2,000 of service? So that when the switchboard goes down or when we want to update the internal lighting, for example, and things like that, when you've got control of your asset, you might actually, you know, while you're not generating income, you're actually saving expenditure. Your net result's going to be the same, if not improved, by asking for things like that. So there's probably just a few things to ask rather than asking for cash, because right now, particularly in the last 2 years, the cash is drying up and there's a lot of companies out there that are going to be really reticent to doing that, but they also still want to support community. So how do you think a little bit diverse from there as well? And also rebates, that's the other one too. So, you know, if we buy $2,000 worth of, you know, water from you this year, can we get 5% back in cash at the end of the year or halfway through the year? So there's a lot of those larger organizations, particularly in that fast moving consumer good, which is your pies, your sausage rolls, your drinks, those sort of food areas. They'll often be open, particularly for being able to storytell giving back to community, where you can actually ask for a rebate based on stock that you've purchased throughout the year as well. So the message is just ask the question. A couple more slides, Brooke, and then I think we'll hand over to Ian, because I'm actually really interested to have a look at that as well. Stick to the basic principles, particularly when you're going out there. I know that we've got some procurement guidelines that we need to stick to within our corporate governance structure that, you know, if I was to look for some investments over 5K, I can't do that without getting 3 competitive quotes. But what it means is we've got our favourite suppliers, don't get me wrong. We've got our favourite Sparky, our favourite plumber, our favourite AV technician that we like to work with. But ask the question. There's a little bit of creep that'll come in, you know, often you'll go through and, you know, you might need to just, you know, get back and have a chat to Gary or whoever your local supplier is and say, hey, look, I've just tested the market and the reality is that you're about 10% off. You know, can we you know, shave 10% off? And that's always going to benefit the bottom line for you. But more importantly, it keeps that relationship going from there as well. So sometimes it can be a bit tough, particularly knowing that we've got that volunteer committee and we've always used that Sparky or that plumber is on our committee and our board. Just be smart about how you attack that. But again, you've also got to remember that without financial sustainability, there's going to be challenges on the club down the track. And sometimes we've seen some clubs that have unfortunately fallen over due to poor governance and poor structures just around that as well. And one of the other ones that I just wanted to finish on, I think, was I often drive past ovals, we run stadiums, the local pony club, BMX track, whatever it is. Has that electrician sign been there for 10 years? And when was the last time they actually gave you some value for that? Because guess what? They've just got 10 years of free advertising out of you. So every year, make it a point that when you review your insurance policy, you also review your signage and who are you partnering with? Who are you advertising? Who are you supporting and driving business towards? And are you still getting the benefit back in from there? Because I guarantee there's a lot of paddock signs that are around some sporting areas that probably haven't been renewed and reviewed, but there's somebody sitting back just going, I'm getting exposure to, you know, 500 local patrons that are coming down to watch the local match every week and things like that. You've often just got to take a little bit of discipline from there as well. I think that's it, Brooke, if I remember correctly. It is. So yeah. I think, yeah, just thinking about what Michael's saying, there's so much that we can go through, but, you know, chatting with Lloyd and what we apply to not only running our businesses is always review your expenditure and where you've got opportunities to maybe get a better deal, strike up a better relationship, review what you do with your sponsorship packages, because sometimes you're actually outpricing yourself and it's just a little bit unattainable from there, and maybe consider how you can get that back in goods, kind or product. And particularly for those local to Nillumbik that might be coming out, and we're certainly open to supporting as many organisations and associations we can within the 5 Nillumbik leisure facilities that we've been fortunate enough to operate on behalf of council. You know, giving 20 free swims is not a drama to us. It's when you come and say we need $1,000 that we have to say no. We hate saying no. So how does gift, how does goods, how does service and product potentially benefit you to drive revenue, increase raffle opportunities, or more importantly, help with reducing your bottom line is probably a couple of the messages out of there. And happy to pick up some questions through the chat. If there's any questions that we've got a great connection. So my direct supervisor reports into Michael. So we are an ingrained part of the club. If there's anything that anyone from tonight wants to reach out to, that I can also pass messages through to Michael. I'd be more than happy to as well. But that might do for me. I might shut up for a while and hand over to Ian, who's more equipped to talk about utilities than what I am.
I'll do my best. Thanks, Liam. And of course, thanks, Michael and Brooke and the Recreation and Leisure team at Council for putting this together and actually inviting me to speak. I really appreciate the opportunity. So I hope I can give a few things that you don't already know and open your sort of a few insights into how Council can support the clubs to save a bit of money, and a lot of it in respect to myself as Sustainability Officer at Council. A lot of my role tends to look at energy, and so hence the looking at saving money, saving energy. And one of the things I think that Liam alluded to a number of times is around utilities. So maybe, Brooke, if we could just click to the next slide, because we're going to look at official practices now. Just a little bit of an anecdotal story. I won't name a club, but there's been a few clubs that have contacted Council in the last 18 months, a bit shocked at the size of their utility bills, particularly electricity, more so than gas, having a bit of an eye-opening experience about why the bills are so high, even though there's no operations going on. And for officers in Council, we reflect that back in the fact that it's because you're still using energy, you're still consuming electricity, that your bills are obviously, you use it, you pay for it. But I'm not sure how much a lot of the club people actually consider how much energy is particularly going into the club to run the freezers, run the refrigerators, to run the general equipment. I know we visited a number of sports clubs during the lockdown. We were finding coffee machines on, we were finding great big double fridges that were running 24 hours with rotten food in there, with maybe 2 bottles of sauce and, you know, a moldy loaf of bread, but all of these things still running continuously. And some of the clubs that were finding this were actually saying, but our bills are massive, you know, what's going on? So a lot of the time we ask to reflect on how you actually consuming energy within your facility. And that's where we ask you to almost sort of be a bit mindful and look at your refrigeration, your equipment, heating and cooling, obviously their field lighting. There's been a fairly large drive over the last year to 2 years and coming in future to address a lot of the older inefficient field lighting. So I will mention that if any of you are concerned with your field lighting, let the team in Recreation and Leisure know. And that's something that there's a few different people within Council look at to try and make a difference for the clubs. And also things like water heating. Like I know I've visited a number of clubs where there's the outside chiller and it's still running through winter, through summer. It's just something that's turned on and seems to not be turned off. So that's just a little bit of an insight into things to be mindful of. And it's to be mindful that it's not the work of one person, you know, it's around establishing a club culture around avoiding waste, quite simply avoiding the waste of energy, or waste of water, you know, the waste of gas, because ultimately the club will pay for that. So if you can sort of drive a bit of a club culture for efficiency and Council can support that, it's a really, it's a really good place to start, you know, so avoiding costs through avoiding consumption unnecessarily. So we can see in the bottom there, energy plans, and Liam, you mentioned energy plans and bills, so have a little look at that in a sec, and also grants, as mentioned by Michael. So I'll have a bit more of a dive into some of those ideas. Also happy to take any questions through the chat. That's a very busy slide, and apologies for that. I just wanted to put a bill in there because sometimes bills can be a bit of a shock. There's quite a difference between the bills you get for a club typically than you get for your own home. You will very rarely get a domestic residential plan for your club. You'll usually be on some sort of business plan, and they typically come with a bit of a premium cost. So, you know, like I've got there in the blue and white text, the Victorian average home is around 18 kilowatt hours a day. Generally, the costs average out around 30 cents per kilowatt hour, which is how consumption is measured. And it's not unusual to get a bill, a quarterly bill, in the order of $500 to $600 in the average Victorian home, whereas clubs can quite easily, especially when they're operating, use 2, 3, 4 times that sort of electricity. And as Liam also mentioned, you know, our large leisure facilities are the largest consumers of energy in the Shire. And we've actually mapped every single facility across Nillumbik that's in the property portfolio from the most to the least in terms of energy consumption. And we typically find most of the sports club are in the top 20 to 30 and above. And once we start getting down to sort of building 30 and 40 and below, that's all looking at 0.5%, 0.25%, 0.1% of the total Shire. But some of our sports clubs are using a measurable percentage, of the Shire's total energy use for buildings. So it's really worth paying attention to it. Get familiar with the bills. On the right-hand side, there's a bit there that's showing usage and charges. It's worth taking some time, whether you get them electronically or via paper, to don't just pay that bill, have a bit of a look at it, and have a little bit of a look at your historical use. I know COVID's throwing a bit of a curveball in terms of historical use, and it should be down, really should be down. If it's not dipped through COVID, then you've probably got a lot of things still running while no one's there. But please check charges, because you'll find that few retailers give prizes for loyalty. Almost none of them will actually say, thanks for being with us for 2 years and not checking your bill. We're actually just going to jack it up a little bit more. And then the next year, we're just going to jack it up a little bit more. So a bit of due diligence on looking at your bills. I really recommend it. It's probably one of the easiest ways you can actually save money. So with the next slide, thanks, Brooke. Now, we see the ads on TV with meerkats, cute meerkats, and all that sort of stuff, really, to compare the markets. The state government has established the Victorian Energy Compare website for residential and for business. So I strongly recommend, if you have access to a copy of a bill, check this site out. Brooke, are you going to be sharing the presentations with participants?
Yeah, definitely. It's being recorded, so I can send all these links as well, and there's access to the.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, appreciate that. So I suggest, quite strongly actually, to go into the compareenergy.vic.gov.au. State government sort of backed. It's not the meerkats where they're taking a cut. This is purely, you know, for the benefit of the residents and for the businesses to pop in the data that you're asked for, and it will actually bring up a fairly significant spreadsheet of opportunities for your energy consumption patterns and how, with other deals, with other providers, other retailers, you can actually save money and how much. And while you're at it for the sports club, I reckon it's a really good idea to do it for home. And also while you're there, it's electricity and it's gas. It can also give you deals for renewable energy and green power, if that's something that the club is interested in. There's a bit more about that a little later that I'll get to, hopefully, that the council's working on. But another tip that's actually a bit aside from all of this stuff is the power saving bonus. So it's probably a nice thing for clubs to put out to their members, I would suggest, that any member, any resident of Victoria that has a government card, say a healthcare card, pension card, seniors card, is actually eligible for a $250 power saving bonus. It's like it's almost like a handout just for registering your details. And that's also accessible through this site. And that expires, as it says, on January 31st next year. So that's almost like a community service. I'm not saying, you know, get your members to get $250 and then plow it back into the club, but who knows, with some of your the tricks that clubs might be able to do. There might be some incentives. I'll probably leave that there. But seriously, go in and check this out. And you might be surprised. I know I even did it for myself recently for my home deal. And I've probably saved around about 30 to 40% on what I was paying. So it does work. And to go to the next one. So looking a little bit more specifically about the facilities and sort of back to the idea of appliances. Most clubs, and I've visited quite a few and done a number of audits, so I actually have a number of audits on file. I can't remember where this one is. You may recognise it if it's yours. A lot of big old double door fridges that someone didn't want at home, something that used to live out in the shed at home. Oh, let's just take it to the club. They need a bit more refrigeration. And all that can really add up to some significant use. Some of these big double door fridges running fairly regularly can easily use a couple of dollars of electricity a day. And if you're not really keeping them stocked up and there's only a few things in them, they run even harder. So it's worth trying to condense as many products into a single, smallest space, even the newest fridge, because they're typically more efficient. But try and minimize the use of refrigeration. And if you've got a cool room, for instance, if you're able to reduce the use of a cool room, that's not a bad thing. If you can sort of condense some contents of a cool room into a small unit or a smaller unit, there's a way of saving a bit there. And it's worth trying to upgrade refrigeration if you can. And if you've got some of the old units with leaky seals, they're a bit moldy around the seal, or there's water starting to drip out, you see the rust around the edges, it's probably not worth it anymore, to be honest. Even if it's an old favorite fridge that you've picked up from, one of the members who, may have a bit of a history with the club. It's waste of energy, really. And again, also appliances, generally speaking. There's a lot of things that use a lot of power: sandwich machines, coffee machines, bain-maries. Sometimes these things are left on for long periods of time when it's really not that necessary, particularly in operating times. But coffee machines are a classic for being left on. So it's probably worth training the barista to just get into the habit of flicking it off at the end of a day, especially once we come back out of COVID and the clubs are starting to crank up again. Thanks, Brooke. And we'll see, because these are council facilities. Council invests quite heavily in upgrading the equipment within the clubs and the facilities. So you probably have found over time that a lot of these reverse cycle air conditioners have started appearing in the club rooms. Even though they are far more efficient than gas, they still can use a bit of electricity, sometimes up to 1,500 to 2,000 watts for the larger units. The larger clubs might have a couple of them. I know one of the newest facilities built has 6 in the main sort of the community room. That's a fairly significant amount of power, and especially if you're turning them on, you're setting them to 16 degrees or 18 degrees on a particularly hot day or particularly warm on a cold day. They don't run any harder, they just run longer. So it's worth set them to a temperature and just let them go. And I know it's a bit of a no-brainer, I guess, but try and keep doors and windows shut with these units, because they operate best. They just recirculate the air within, and if they're continually having to circulate, heat up or cool down air that's been drawn in from outside, they just work super hard. But they are good units, and we are looking to do a few more upgrades as we look to sort of switch away from gas in time. And I mentioned the boilers and the chiller units. Again, a lot of them can be just switched off when they're not in use, put on timers. Some of them could probably do with being replaced or upgraded. And there are a number of units that do hot and cold at the same time. So things to consider. And lighting. Internal lighting, it's not really a lot compared to, say, a big old fridge. But if you suspect your club still has some older, inefficient lighting, I don't know that there'd be much halogen left. Basically, halogen lights are essentially heaters that give off light. There might be some field lighting left to be done. But if you suspect your lighting's a bit old, bit inefficient, maybe let Brooke or one of the team in Rec and Leisure know, and we can have a bit of a chat about maybe there's a project in that. So I think there's one more. So at the moment, there's a few things council can do. At the moment, we're looking to build we're not looking to build, we're basically starting a solar farm next year. That'll be supplying obviously 100% renewable energy for council. But part of that, we're looking to extend existing group procurement contracts for tenants from our current deal, which is with, I won't say the retailer, but we have group procurement contracts available for our tenanted sites to participate in to get the same deal as council. And we'll be looking to extend that once we have the solar farm up and running as well. So being able to, for facilities to access 100% renewable energy through a group procurement contract. So that's something we can discuss afterwards. That's just something I thought I'd mention. But if anything to do with bills, more than happy to help with that. It's not just me. My partner, or colleague, I should say, Seamus, he's a gun with all this stuff. He loves it. Plus, we can do site visits. So if you've got any queries or you think there's something that's worth looking at, we're more than happy to come out, do site assessments, have a look around the facilities. We also do efficiency and renewal projects. There's us, and there's also the property and facilities maintenance team that do renewal projects, and also the recreation and leisure team have got a lot of plans for upgrades and renewals. So we work closely where we can. And the last one, as mentioned earlier, is the grants. And there's a pretty good grant at the moment that the clubs could consider. And I think that's going to be the last slide. Is that right? I think that's the last one. So Sustainability Victoria have put aside a pool of funds for basically community facilities, of which our sporting clubs are. And there's two streams of funding available in the Climate Change and Energy Program. Stream one is basically paying for audits to be done. So that's essentially, with a successful application, that allows the club through council would definitely support. Council won't put these in, but if you're interested in being part of the process, then it's a great idea for you to contact council, and we can then start the investigation of what can be done. But the audit would look at the building, look at the facilities, and identify opportunities for gains. And that's up to 5,000, and there's no requirement of co-funding. Stream two, there's implementation. So there are multiple streams or multiple applications. So there's actually 3 rounds of funding available. And the first round has already moved through. The next round is scheduled towards the end of the year, with the third and final round scheduled earlier to sort of mid next year. The idea being put in for an audit, do your audit, then in a follow-up application, then maybe put in for a capital project on the back of that audit. So we're more than happy to help clubs to identify capital project opportunities and also to look into doing audits. And it doesn't have to be a small facility. This can be quite big facilities. This can be, the large leisure facilities down to, even a scout hall, So there's no real limit to what can be considered. But with stream two, with the capital projects, it's co-funded. So there'd be the expectation, or negotiation is maybe a better way to put it, around how co-funding for project implementation would be determined. But that's a grants of up to $25,000. So considering projects of up to $25,000, it can be for equipment, maybe it can be for new refrigerators, solar, not necessarily, maybe batteries, I don't know, replacement of maybe gas hot water service with efficient electric, etc. But this is the sort of thing that a good assessment could actually help drag out. And the tier two of 50,000, that's much more around the idea of innovation that is probably maybe a next level, but absolutely it's a possibility, and we're always at council looking for opportunities to innovate and test out new ways of making things better to reduce energy. And it also has the climate and carbon emissions offset as part of it. So there's reporting it's not as simple as just, here's your money, go and have fun with your project. There's obviously a bit more to do with it being a government grant. But we're more than happy to explore this opportunity with our sports clubs and to I suppose, navigate through the process of application, and if successful, then the implementation of the outcomes. So, yeah. Is that it?
Yeah, and we just had a question in the chat just about if Stream 2 would include replacing old ground lighting systems.
Which system? Sorry, I missed that bit.
If the Stream 2 would include replacing old ground lighting systems.
Well, it's interesting because ground lighting systems are typically quite large, and typically I would suggest they're not necessarily innovative. Best practice could be argued, but it's not a novel project. And I know some of the projects that we've run are much more expensive than a $25,000 project. I know some of the larger ones we've done have been in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. So we may, I don't know, it's something to discuss, because I don't know this particular, the site or the example of the existing conditions to say yes or no, you know, as a definitive. But I think it's worth exploring any opportunities before just saying no.
And maybe another one for you. Does Nillumbit Council have contacts for someone to clean and replace globes in ground lighting? That might be a bit tricky. Might not be specific for you.
Yeah, that might be something to talk with the capital projects team, because a lot of that stuff is capital works. And we do have an electrical contractor that is quite proficient and capable of that work. But it's probably best to contact council and than me just saying, oh yeah, call these guys. But we do have access to most trades and services that a club might require, and we have our dedicated processes around due diligence. So I suppose we're mindful of just giving out anybody's name, not to be a stick in the mud. Yeah, but and like I say, I'm more than happy to follow up with any club and any query, and try and sort of come up with some solution. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a grant, because we're continually looking to improve our facilities and to assist our, you know, the clubs to save a bit of money and, you know, maintain really high quality services. Cool.
Well, yeah, we do have some time for questions. Thank you for that, Ian. That was really helpful. That was really valuable as well. So hopefully the clubs can get something out of that and reduce their costs. But yeah, we do have some time for questions. Feel free to take yourself off mute or drop any questions in the chat function that you might have for either Liam or Ian or any of us in the Recreation and Leisure team. There was also a question earlier that someone's just re-mentioned about recycling. Can council help with recycling? Currently, all bins are in public areas, so the recycling is being sent to waste. I don't know if you'd know anything about that, Ian.
Not a great deal. I know, because I understand that council, I might be wrong, but I understand council doesn't necessarily do the waste collection services at the sporting clubs.
I can add into that, Ian. It's Rebecca here.
Hi, Rebecca.
So I know a little bit about this, but again, we can follow up further if I'm incorrect. So my understanding is that obviously the public bins that sporting clubs use and the public also have access to, that is picked up and collected through our waste management team. And the reason why we can't have separate recycling bins or dedicated recycling bins is because we can't control what the public put into those bins. And so once the bins are collected, they then can't be sorted, and the contamination that goes into those recycling bins ends up meaning that they have to go into landfill anyway. So we can't actually have dedicated recycling bins and landfill bins for that reason. That's my basic knowledge of that. Hope that's clear.
Yeah, thanks, Beck. And I think that would be something to follow up with the waste team if anyone is really interested in pursuing that. But yeah, if there's any more questions, or if you think of any questions at a later date, I'll share everyone's emails from this presentation, or feel free to send me an email and we can definitely follow up for you. If you're interested in the sustainability grants as well, definitely follow up with either Ian or myself and we can help with that. But did anyone else have any questions for Liam or Ian tonight?
Hi everyone, James here from Greensboro Hockey Club. I'm just curious, we're very lucky to have a brand new club rooms over the last year or so, but we were a bit surprised that solar panels or battery or any of those type of innovations weren't included. So I'm just curious.
James, you seem to have gone on mute halfway through your question or comment. Sorry.
Sorry about that. Yeah, the question was just, is that something we can still push for going forward, or was there a reason perhaps why things like that weren't included?
Yeah, I can't say there's a reason why they weren't included, probably other than upfront costs and the scale of the developments that have been implemented typically were overcost. And a lot of the technologies such as solar and batteries are quite simply retrofittable. So going forward, these are really good ideas to look into, and something that we're definitely considering and looking into the opportunities. So I'll be quite happy to follow up conversations with pretty much any of the clubs that don't have solar, and to look into how we can, if you're particularly interested anyway, look into how we can maybe change that up and get some solar, or what processes we'd actually need to enact to make that happen. Because some buildings also, apart from the new ones, some of the older buildings aren't necessarily suitable or appropriate, and we may need to do engineering and structural engineering checks just to ensure that it's viable. Does that help?
Thank you.
Did anyone else have any questions? We do still have a little bit of time, so if we don't have any more questions, we can probably have an early finish tonight. But yeah, definitely, if you do think of anything at a later date, just send me through an email or send through an email to any of our presenters, and I'm sure they'd be happy to help you out.
Definitely happy to help. And thanks for the opportunity to talk with the committee members. Thank you. Yeah, no worries. A massive thank you to both Liam and Ian and Michael as well for presenting tonight. I do hope the clubs can take something out of it and apply it back to your facilities. But yeah, we'll definitely be sharing the recording. So if you do, if you've forgotten any of the information or want to view it again, I'll send through the link tomorrow. But yeah, does anyone else have any last quick questions before we finish up? No. All right, well, a big thank you to everyone for taking the time out of your night for coming tonight. I do really appreciate it. We do have our last workshop, which will be in November, so stay tuned for the details for that one. But thank you again to everyone for coming, and enjoy the rest of your night.
Thanks, Brooke.
Thanks, Brooke. Thanks, everyone.